Okay, so ignore the background noise. Here we have a 2008 Ram 5500. We just put an engine in it and we have a no start issue. Now, we have the old engine over there with the injectors and the CP3 off of it that we did not use. We decided to use the new fuel system off the new engine because LKQ claimed that it ran before. Sorry about the background noise. So I'm gonna come in here now. I'm gonna put this window up. All right, so we have this scanner box here, right? So we come into data and we can look at all of these parameters. We go into fuel and we go to turbo. Ignition is on. We have been trying to diagnose this thing for a long time now. We never got verification that this engine ran. So if you come down to high pressure, Commonrail, fuel pressure. So we were getting about 145 PSI and we were trying for 5,800 PSI. So this should be right about 6,000 PSI to start this thing. Obviously it's getting a no start. It's not even trying to start. Everything's full of fuel. We replaced both of the drain or the overflow valves. So we did that. So now what we're gonna do is move to the next step. We actually unplugged. Still the same results. We've done the multimeter testing and everything. Everything comes down to either we have injectors that are leaking and causing too high of a return rate, or the CP3 pump. Now usually the CP3s don't fail on this, but since we have all 6 injectors, we are only going to be doing the labor on this and just swapping the old injectors back to the new motor and going from there. So there's no cost on the customer side other than labor, and that's basically it. But we got no verification. We were told to use the new injectors. The new injectors quite possibly could be junk, so we're going to pull them and test them at some point, but we are going to swap the other 6 into this truck, and I'm going to show you guys how to do it. All right, so sorry about the noise in the background. It is a loud one today, unfortunately. Worst day to pick a video. So what we're gonna do is take the oil cap off, take all of 8 millimeters off, and pull this out of the way. Mind you, you'll also wanna get this clamp up here. Now, if you can't get this off, you can take a pick on the inside of this, and then it'll pry free. Mine came off because we just had it off. So now we're gonna pick this whole thing up and take it out of the way. Now the next step, there's a sensor up there you're gonna wanna unplug. Super easy, just push on that and pops right off. And then you're gonna wanna do the 10 millimeter bolts on the valve cover itself, as well as a 19 millimeter on both of those. So obviously hold on to this while you're undoing it and then unplug your valve cover harness. This next step, you're going to want to take off all of the 8 millimeter nuts that are fastened down and then pull the valve cover harness out of the way. All right, so next step, you're going to want to take off the bottom part of the valve cover, which is a bunch of 10 millimeter bolts. There's 7 of them, so. All right, so now I'm going to take the intake horn off. It's 11 millimeter on the clamp. You'll have a plug for the throttle valve, and if you have your EGR, you have your EGR, but in this case we don't, so we're going to take off all the 10 millimeter bolts, slide this out of the way, and then we can start pulling the injector lines off. There you can see the connector. I can't get the camera down in there, but just push. And you'll hit it and then pop it off. That'll come right out. All right, next up we're going to take off every one of the injection lines. So we're going to do that now. It's a, I believe, 19 millimeter. And then pull every one of these off. Okay, so the next step you want to do is you want to take off the nut that holds in the cross tubes, which is a 24 millimeter. So I'm going to get to doing that. So, and then they come right out. And then to get these out, don't damage these threads as you pull them. But in my case, they come out pretty easy because we just put them in. So, I mean, you can get a pry bar on here. There is a proper tool to do this. There's many different ways to do it. Just do not damage these threads. Now, once you get those nuts out and the cross tube, which by the way, keep these cross tubes with the injector that they came from, you're gonna wanna take off the exhaust rocker, which is a 10 millimeter bolt. We just did a valve adjustment on this, so we're not gonna worry about readjusting the valves when we throw it back on. Just make sure that you keep these with the cylinder that they came off of. All right, so now to pull the injector out, I'm gonna do these one at a time. That way I don't have to like throw everything apart since I've already done this once. So you're gonna wanna take the 8 millimeter bolts off of these and take them off even, and then you can pretty much pull the injector out. And if it doesn't come out, I can show you a trick to get it out, so. All right, so when you go to pull these, there's a slot, which I'll show you, right there underneath, where you can actually take a pry bar and lightly pry up on it, and these will pop out. Depending on how much force you have to use, you might want to screw these screws in a little bit so that it doesn't fly up. I've had that happen before, but now that we know that it happens, we don't actually do that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this out, keep this with the cross tube, because we're gonna get this tested all together. We're gonna get all of these tested, but in this case, we're gonna reuse the old injectors off of this motor, because this pump with these injectors worked great. So we're gonna swap these back in and hopefully get this thing to fire up. All right, so once you start taking injectors out of the donor motor, you can come over here, put your injector in, pop it down, take your cross tube and stick it in and pop. So then we'll take this, torque spec I believe is in between 37 and 43 foot-pounds. So we tend to go a little bit higher on those, but that's to keep these from leaking. So what you're gonna want to do before you tighten that down is you're gonna want to tighten down the injector and then loosen it back off. That way you know it's set, and then you can torque this down and then re-torque your injector. Okay, you'll see that you want to go back and forth, keep this thing level, and then once that's seated down, you know it's tight, then you'll want to back it off, obviously as even as possible. So, you know, a turn or two on each side. And now that that's loose, now you can take your cross tube and pop it in, and then torque that down. So we'll grab the torque wrench and we will torque that to like 45 foot-pounds, something like that. All right, something to make mention of, if you are doing this with an actual torque wrench, you will have to take your rail off, the fuel rail. So I did not have to do that because this is what I'm using to torque it. I know what the torque spec feels like from this to that torque wrench up there. And you can verify that on the first one and make sure that they're all tight. So as long as they're all equally tightened, obviously, like, you do not need to take the rail off. That's the way that I'm going to do it. I have never had a problem with it as long as it's over that 43 foot-pounds. So just wanted to make a mental note of that. So now that once you got all the injectors in, now we're gonna put everything back together. Now when you torque this thing down, you're gonna wanna make sure that your gasket is on and set correctly, as well as you start in the middle and then work your way out evenly and make sure that they are torqued to spec. So that's what I'm gonna do. All right, now we're going to put the fuel lines back on. You can do this before or after this step. I decided to do it after in this case. I don't know why, but that's just how we're gonna do it. So I'm gonna go grab every one of them, throw them on, tighten them all down. Now you'll know which one goes to the injector because the long side, that goes to the injector, and then the side with the nut on the top, as opposed to all of it, this will go to the rail. Now again, these are a 19 millimeter. So there you go. All right, so we just did our first fire up. The injectors, the old ones, wouldn't even try to fire it. We threw the old injectors from that motor into the new motor, and this thing fired right up. So we're gonna put the valve cover back on, take this outside, and let it idle and get the cooling system bled. All right, so when you're throwing these back on, I wanna also make mention that they do not need to be torqued a lot. You need to literally, like, just enough. Like, that's barely put any pressure to these at all. Just enough that they're tight, but not, you'll snap these off quick. Okay, so here is the other set of injectors. Obviously, you guys can see this thing runs. This thing it's pretty damn quiet for what it is. So I'm gonna call that job good. I hope you guys learned something from it. Feel free to use this video if you need to for your how-to on swapping these injectors. There probably is a few better ones out there. Unfortunately, with the shop environment that I'm doing it in, working with a ton of other people, I can't actually film over the music, otherwise my videos get demonetized, and yeah, so then we don't get paid for it. So with that being said, when we get the new shop, which there will be a new shop if I haven't already gotten it by now since this video came out, I will try to do a lot better how-to videos for you guys, and that way there won't be any music in the background. So hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to dislike the video, unsubscribe, and leave a hate comment. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a good one.